Have you ever heard music playing in an empty building, notes drifting through hallways where no one should be? The Conservatory of Fine Arts had always been Sarah's sanctuary. For 3 years, she'd spent countless hours in practice room 7, perfecting her scales under the watchful eye of Professor Helena Morrison. But Professor Morrison had been dead for 6 months now, found slumped over the grand piano in the main recital hall, her fingers still positioned on the keys. Sarah first noticed something was wrong during her Tuesday evening practice session. The building was supposed to be empty after 9, but she could hear the faint sound of piano music echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. Not just any music, but Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Professor Morrison's favorite piece to teach. She paused her own playing, straining to listen. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, played with the same precise technique and emotional depth that had made Professor Morrison legendary among students. But the notes carried an otherworldly quality, as if they were being played through water or from a great distance. Sarah gathered her courage and stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows on the walls lined with portraits of distinguished faculty members. Professor Morrison's photograph hung prominently near the main staircase, her kind eyes seeming to follow Sarah's movement. The music grew louder as Sarah approached the recital hall. Through the small window in the door, she could see the stage bathed in moonlight streaming through the tall windows. The grand piano sat center stage, its black surface gleaming like a dark mirror. And there, seated at the bench with perfect posture, was Professor Morrison. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The figure was translucent, shimmering like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Professor Morrison's fingers moved across the keys with fluid grace, her head tilted at the familiar angle Sarah remembered so well from countless lessons. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She ran to the nearest exit, not stopping until she reached her car in the parking lot. The next day, Sarah tried to convince herself it had been a hallucination brought on by stress and grief. But when she mentioned the incident to her classmate Marcus, his face went pale. "You saw her too?" he whispered. "I thought I was losing my mind." Marcus had encountered Professor Morrison the previous week while retrieving sheet music he'd forgotten. She had been in practice room 12, teaching an invisible student, her voice carrying through the walls with patient corrections and encouragement. "Play it again, dear. Remember, the left hand must sing as beautifully as the right." Word spread quickly among the music students. Everyone had a story. Emma had seen Professor Morrison adjusting the bench height in practice room 3. David had felt cold fingers guiding his hands during a particularly difficult passage. Lisa had heard the professor's voice, whispering technique reminders in her ear during a solo performance. But the encounters were becoming more intense, more demanding. Students reported feeling compelled to stay later, practice longer, push themselves beyond their limits. Several had collapsed from exhaustion after marathon practice sessions they couldn't remember deciding to extend. Sarah began researching Professor Morrison's death. The official cause was listed as a heart attack, but deeper investigation revealed troubling details. In her final months, the professor had become obsessed with achieving perfection in her students. She had been staying at the conservatory until dawn, sometimes sleeping in her office, driven by an inexplicable need to create the perfect musician. The truth became clear when Sarah found Professor Morrison's final journal entry hidden in the piano bench of the recital hall. "They don't understand that music is eternal. Death cannot silence a true teacher. I will continue to guide them, to perfect them, even if it takes forever." Sarah realized with growing horror that Professor Morrison wasn't just haunting the conservatory. She was collecting students, trapping their souls in an endless cycle of lessons and practice. The ghostly encounters weren't random. They were auditions. As Sarah read the journal by moonlight streaming through the recital hall windows, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. The temperature dropped and her breath became visible in small puffs of vapor. "Sarah, dear," came the professor's voice, warm and welcoming as always. "You're here so late. Perfect. We have so much work to do, and eternity is such a wonderful thing to have. For practice." The piano bench creaked as an invisible weight settled upon it. The keys began to move by themselves, playing a melody Sarah had never heard before, but somehow knew by heart. A melody that would never end.